Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name, that the Parliament of St. Lucia acknowledges receipt of the report of the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project Review Committee, hereinafter referred to as the Review Committee, and expresses its profound thanks and gratitude to the members of the Review Committee for their sterling contribution, diligence, and selfless dedication in completing the report. That the Parliament of St. Lucia do advise the Cabinet of Ministers to consider and approve the recommendation presented by the Review Committee for the completion and commissioning of the St. Jude Hospital to facilitate the move and transfer of operations from the George Odlum National Stadium to the original St. Jude Hospital site. That the Parliament of St. Lucia do advise the Cabinet of Ministers to explore other sustainable opportunities for the St. Jude Hospital site. That the Parliament of St. Lucia, cognizant of the distressing conditions of the St. Jude Hospital at the George Odlum National Stadium, further expresses its profound gratitude to the doctors, nurses, staff, and patients for their contribution, dedication, patience, and commitment over the years. Mr. Speaker, before I begin my contribution to this debate, I crave your indulgence to do the following. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, permit me to extend a sincere apology on behalf of the government of St. Lucia to every St. Lucian who has been affected directly or indirectly by the unavailability of a functioning and modern St. Jude Hospital over the past 13 years. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I wish also to apologize to the devoted and resilient staff of St. Jude, who has turned up for work day in and day out over the past 13 years in the extremely challenging conditions at the George Odlum Stadium. Despite these difficult conditions, they continue to do their best to save the lives of all entrusted to their care. I say to them that the depth of gratitude St. Lucia owes them cannot be measured and can never be repaid. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, I wish to apologize to every individual, community group, and business, as well as the governments of Taiwan, Australia, Mexico, Germany, Israel, and India, who responded to St. Lucia's plea for help to rebuild St. Jude Hospital after the fire. The government understands the disappointment that they must feel at the fact that a modern St. Jude is still not a reality, and what they went through in the last 5 years in particular. I want to say simply but sincerely that we are sorry, and I wish to assure them that while my administration continues to hold their trust, we will do everything we can do to end the nightmare experience with St. Jude Hospital and to ensure that it is never repeated. Mr. Speaker, why was the St. Jude Hospital not completed after the fire of 2009? During that fire, Mr. Speaker, there were 47 patients at the hospital. There were 3 deaths. And I want again to express my condolences to those who lost their life during the fire. Mr. Speaker, work started in the hospital in 2010. And the work continued, Mr. Speaker. It continued even after 2011, when the people of St. Lucia, as they did in July 26, changed the government, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, one would ask, why didn't the government not continue work in the hospital? And apart from the fact that we know of the callous nature of that government, we do not see it, we could not find a reason why. But, Mr. Speaker, the truth always prevails. And I was looking at Hansard, on the 13th of February 2018, and a contribution from the Honorable Prime Minister at that time. And here is what he said, and I quote, Hansard, 13 February 2018. The Honorable Member for Mico South, Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Economic Growth, Job Creation, External Affairs, and the Public Service. And now that these titles have dwindled to the Member for Mico South. So we have St. Jude, in which the opposition matched. When they were in opposition, they claimed that we are taking too long to open up St. Jude. And at the time, we are talking about 9 months to 1 year of recommendations of works. They came in, and for 5 years, you know, Madam Speaker, the fact is, you can't hide the facts. Right at the gates of St. Jude, I think that St. Peter was there, normally praying, blaspheming. So you cannot change what the facts are. It is not a fact that the building was unfinished when they came in. And it's not a fact that the money was there in order to be able to finance the buildings. And what happened after 5 years? The amount of money went from 40 million to 40 million to 60 million. And in fact, there are letters all over to say that finally the hospital was going to open in August 2016. Actually, sorry, not August, in July of 2016. And the member was right. We stopped the project just at the beginning of July because we realized that the project was not even close to be completed, was not even close to be completed. And it continues. Now, anybody who has any sense of common sense would say, let me see what your plans are. Let me see what your schedules are for construction. And when is it we realistically believe that this was going to be finished? There was no such plans. And I want you, Mr. Speaker, to listen to that. There were no such plans. That's what the member from Mico South said. So, in realizing that there were no such plans, Cabinet felt it was prudent to be able to hire a consultant to come in. And who the consultant was, as is my style, I will not mention anybody's name. And I go further. But the same solution company that we want to be able to protect, but the other side, it is okay when it's convenient to do so. It is not when it's reality. So all of a sudden, now, you have a hospital in which the report says, remember, she said previously, there was no report. So all of a sudden, you have a hospital in which the report says that there is $50 million of quantifiable expenditure. So based on the physical work on the ground and all the inventory and of all the items and the container, in fact, 2 containers just arrived yesterday or just last week, and that had been in Canada for 2 years on the dock. And the report says that there is expenditures, his words, of disbursements of 118 million. That is why government now has gone to the next step, because it does not want to be the person making this allegation without evidence. And so we have taken the precaution of hiring Price Waterhouse to be able to do a financial audit to determine where the 118 million gone. Price Waterhouse. So that the taxpayers of St. Lucia never knew that Price Waterhouse was hired to perform an audit on St. Jude. Never revealed to the taxpayers of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. And we speak about transparency and who was not revealing what report about who. But just to say, and listen to the instructive words, Mr. Speaker. But just to say, and here's why he's not continuing it. But just to say that we are going to continue a flawed project for the sake of meeting your mandate, of which you had 5 years to achieve, which you did not achieve, is not what is going to work on this side. He did not complete the hospital because we are just to say that we are going to continue to achieve a flawed project for the sake of meeting your mandate, of which you had 5 years to achieve, which you did not achieve, is not what is going to work. So in spite of the $1 million, the millions of dollars that were spent, just for him not to continue a project so that he could not continue the mandate of the government at the time, Mr. Speaker. So we found why the project was not continued. Pure political retribution. So you allow the people of the country to suffer. You allow $118 million to remain on the ground because you do not want to follow the mandate of the last government. But, Mr. Speaker, it goes on. Remember, the words of Hansard, there were no reports, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, listen to that. An audit was commissioned Mr. Speaker, at a cost of $1 million. So that's one investigation. Then, you know, they hired Pricewaterhouse to do a financial audit. No cost for that. Don't know how much it costs. None of these reports, Mr. Speaker, have been tabled or have been made public. None of these reports have been tabled in the Honorable House or have been made public, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, here is what we know. What we know, Mr. Speaker, is that in 2016, all the main buildings had been significantly completed with roofs. And I say roofs, Mr. Speaker, because I'm going to back to a story of roofs. And I want you to remember why I said roofs. I said these buildings had continued and there were roofs on them. Note, Mr. Speaker, there were roofs on these buildings. And I'm going to come back to roofs as time goes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there was a handover report which was never made public, Mr. Speaker. And the handover report came from the people who were working at St. Jude's Hospital, not prepared by politicians, not prepared by members of parliament coming in this house and postulating and making a big fuss of things they don't know about, playing engineer. It was a report by professionals, Mr. Speaker. It was called the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Report, Mr. Speaker. That was never made public. The public never knew that in 2016, August 2016, there was a report about the conditions that existed at St. Jude in the unfinished buildings, which I'm going to refer to now, Mr. Speaker, as the original St. Jude's. There was a report. What was in the report, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, there was a project manager, there was a project steering committee made up of only civil servants, absolutely no politicians. Only civil servants were involved, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, the report clearly states, Mr. Speaker, the funding for the buildings in stage 1. The funding for the buildings, Mr. Speaker. It says $41 million worth of grants and donations. $41 million worth of grants and donations, Mr. Speaker. And these were received before March 2020. They were deposited with the Accountant General. And after 2020, they were deposited in a project account at the Bank of St. Lucia. That is clear in the report, Mr. Speaker. $41 million was collected and it was deposited in the Bank of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the report also says that the hospital was funded by a $20 million grant in US dollar loan in January 2015, of which 50% was disbursed. So you have $41 million worth of grants and $10 million worth of loan, which was negotiated in 2015, and which 50% of that loan was disbursed, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and the report clearly states, so when they pretend that they were not aware of how much money was spent in the first phase, Mr. Speaker, the report clearly states the total project expenditure up to financial year of 2016 2017, period ended July 31st, 2016, was certified by the accounts and verified, was $98,451,346.85. That was the project expenditure on the original St. Jude site. Clearly taken. So when you go around, they go around, Mr. Speaker, with the propaganda and the false audits and the false information that they did not know how much money was spent. And Mr. Speaker, they knew how much money was spent because it was clear in another report, which they had. But in their normal style of flashing mirrors and trying to deceive the people of St. Lucia, they refused to tell the people of St. Lucia that $98 million was spent on the original buildings, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we're going further. What did the report say? The report said that there were challenges because the money was the job was done in components, difficult to implement, and they also said that the money did not come like in one tranche. It came in bits and pieces. It came from grants. The Mexicans gave a grant, the Indians gave a grant, etc. So it came in bits and pieces, Mr. Speaker. So the funding was inadequate and was inconsistent, Mr. Speaker. The report clearly outlines the issues, challenges, and constraints. Very clear. Nothing to hide. It clearly outlined what were the issues in the original St. Jude Hospital. Clearly outlined, Mr. Speaker. Clearly. Any government or any minister of finance who really has the interest of the people at heart would take that report, give it to his consultants or his people, and say, look at these challenges and see how we can redeem them, Mr. Speaker. And the reason why I say that, Mr. Speaker, because this is not the only report that the government had in its possession that could deal with the situation in the original buildings. There's another report which they had. So they spent the $1 million, and they have another report which I will speak to in a few moments, Mr. Speaker. So the plane of I did not know, and we had nothing. We don't know what was happening there, and this and that, and the corridors were too small. All these things, Mr. Speaker, all these things, what was wrong was outlined in that report. Mr. Speaker, the report also lists the outstanding issues for action. Very clearly, it speaks about the outstanding payments for processing. It speaks about the status of all works by all contractors, status of works by subcontractors, statement of procurement of materials and supplies from nominated suppliers, status of storage of procured material and supplies, statement of payments made per contractor, suppliers under all contracts, status of technical support provided to UNOPS. All that was clearly outlined, and the information was available to the government if they were acting in good faith and really wanted to continue St. Jude and did not want to keep the people of the South in the situation that they were in. It was clear. Mr. Speaker, this is one report. Fast forward to July 2026, when the people of St. Lucia decided, as they did in July 26, 2021. Talk about July. Fast forward, Mr. Speaker. When the government came into power in 2016, Mr. Speaker, they had another report. There was another report. And that report is called the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project. Reconstruction of the west and east wings, surgical building, and ancillary buildings at St. Jude. Another handover status report by the consultants. I want you to listen carefully, Mr. Speaker. Two reports. One by the Project Management Committee and another by the consultants, the people who are directly involved in it, Mr. Speaker. It was dated 11th July 2016, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, this report is even more, this report has a lot more detail, Mr. Speaker. A lot more detail. Information which they had. Information which they could act upon, Mr. Speaker. Listen to what's in that report. Mr. Speaker, listen, no wonder you have all these accusations and threats and trying to pull the wool over the eyes of the people and speaking about a box that is 70% complete. No one ever said or saw that, Mr. Speaker. Listen to what the report says. The report says, work status, the status of the buildings. 2, snagging of buildings and infrastructure status. What that report says is all the snags that were in the St. Jude, the original St. Jude, what are they? So all you have to do is go in and look at the report and look at the snags and fix them up. And it also says how you can fix the snags. The report says so. It says in any construction project, particularly large construction projects of that nature, there are going to be snags. And how it has been built, it will have more snags because the finance was inadequate. It wasn't coming. It had to come in pieces. It has all the snags listed, Mr. Speaker, are all the snags in these original buildings and how they can be fixed. All of them. Meantime, Mr. Speaker, if a government is serious and the government is not vindictive and callous, that they will leave these buildings from 2016 to 2019 for bush, for animals, for bats, for rats, and you have a report that says exactly what's wrong? Mr. Speaker, the people of St. Lucia must ensure that these people never get back in the power in St. Lucia. Because this is absolute wickedness, Mr. Speaker. It's wicked, it's callous, Mr. Speaker. You have a report that tells you all what is wrong with the buildings. All what's wrong. It doesn't say the buildings are perfect. It's called a snag report. It also tells you, Mr. Speaker, the activity status, the activities, what is going on when and how you have to deal with it. The activities, you have that in a report by the consultant that's been paid. You know it. It also has, Mr. approval status. I heard one of them say that there was no DC approval. It clearly states the approval status. At what point we're in negotiations with the DCA. And the letters are there. The letters are there. They have the letters. The same way they can bring letters that put them in more trouble. The letters are there about the DCA. But they pretend to ignore it because they did not know that on 26th July we will have that report. What's that of the general elections, 26th July. So they thought that they would cover it up, leave it covered, and then, of course, I must win. This guy can never beat me. And they would have another 5 years to cover it up, Mr. Speaker. But no, the people of St. Lucia thought differently. And that is what is difficult for them to accept, that the people of St. Lucia thought differently. So you have this report, Mr. Speaker. It speaks about the approval status. What is the rate of approval in the negotiations with DCA? All the letters to DCA are there. What is even more significant, it speaks to the drawings issued status. All the drawings that were sent to the DCA, it reports on where they are and at what stage they are with the negotiation of DCA. The drawing status, Mr. Speaker. And listen to it. Listen to that, Mr. Speaker. The report also speaks about the procured items in storage and their status. Mr. Speaker, I hope the people of St. Lucia are listening, Mr. Speaker. You know, so when they took the SSU, and I asked the Commissioner of Police, please, I need a report on that raid. Yes. When they took the SSU and put it on people's trucks and used political operatives and went to invade people's houses. They had a document that said exactly where everything was. I lie? There was a document that said exactly where everything was, Mr. Speaker. A document is listed where everything was. Mr. Speaker, I won't bore you in telling you where it was, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, what is even more depressing and distressing is the things that these guys found, you know. Is what they found, Mr. Speaker. In what was procured and what you paid for. Mr. Speaker, windows, storage tanks, cabinets, Mr. Speaker, it's really medical equipment and furniture. Medical equipment and furniture, Mr. Speaker. All these things the guys found there, Mr. Speaker. Intercom system, paint, windows, doors. All these things, Mr. Speaker, were found. All these things were there, listed, and their locations identified. All of it was there, Mr. Speaker. Coming to you just now. There were heavy-duty wall faucets. There were... Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. That's not a joke, Mr. Speaker. It's not a joke. That's $98 million, and you talk about the roads now. That is $98 million that was available. It's not, Mr. Speaker, this is not, they always want to accuse people, Mr. Speaker, accuse people of all kinds of things. And, Mr. Speaker, these are not things Philip J. Pierre says, you know. These are documented. Water fittings. Mr. Speaker, if that wasn't so serious, you can do two things. Either laugh or cry. Mr. Speaker, when I cry, my crying is serious and real, Mr. Speaker. I don't cry on demand. Mr. Speaker, you mean to tell me, a people who are suffering in a stadium, nurses and doctors, who are giving human service in that stadium, you leave them there because you want to pay, because you don't want to follow the mandate of the last government, because of their flawed projects. You allow them to suffer, Mr. Speaker. When you have a document, Mr. Speaker, that says exactly what you have to do, it also says where all the materials are. It says how much money you spent. It says everything. All you have to do is take the document, call the consultants, let us talk, and fix up the snags. The snags that were identified by your audits, they were identified. If you look at the snag reports, you will see it was identified already. There was no need to pay anybody any $1 million. It was identified already, Mr. Speaker. But you know, what you're looking for is to be vindictive. What you're looking for is to punish somebody. What you're looking for is to create political retribution. That's what you're looking for. So you have a report that already says what the snags are, but you will do another one. But, Mr. Speaker, as the old people say, Bodier ka couché, il pas dormi. Listen to what the report says. After you pay, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I never, in all my political career, which has been very successful, whether you like it or not, due to the people of Kashusis. With the help of the people of Kashusis, I'm a 6-star general. And whether they like it or not, the next time, I'm going to be a 7-star general. And that is what they can't understand. That's what they cannot take. That's what hurting them, Mr. Speaker. I never had to maneuver to win any seat or to maneuver myself and pay this and pay that. I went into the constituency. I worked hard. I convinced the people of Castries East. And regardless of what they do, regardless of what they write, the people of Castries East will always support Philip J. Pierre, whether they like it or not. And if they don't like it, let them pull it in the pipe and smoke it, Mr. Speaker. And my party has never had any injunction against me. The last election, my party nominated me 250 against 0. And I'm proud of my party. I'm very proud of my party, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. And I'm coming back to after they paid that money for the inquiry. Listen to what their own report says. Their own report says, listen to what their own report says. Their own report says, we do see a great value present in the works completed to date and believe the project is salvageable and could be converted into a facility that can properly serve the needs of St. Lucia. What? The report, listen, don't interfere in that. Please, the report is the report that I don't want to mention the company's name. You know well. In fact, you know, you might know. Excuse me. You see, you were quiet. You get involved in that. Don't get involved in that. Do not get involved in that. That's above your pay grade. You signed the injunction? I see you signed something. I see you signed something about a meeting. You signed it? Yeah, the technical report you pay $1 million for. I just don't, you see, Mr. Member for Shows here, since you asked me, I don't want to come and call people's names. That's my problem. So, Mr. Speaker, I have given you two reports. One for handover and another one from the consultant, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, where were we, Mr. Speaker, and what was the human and financial cost of that folly? What was the human and financial cost of that folly, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, the United Workers' Party administration, instead of completing what was already there, decided to throw all logic to the wind and begin the construction of an entirely new hospital. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to outline to you what was found according to the report of the committee, Mr. Speaker. And look at the difference between them and us. Look at the difference, Mr. Speaker. We got a committee of professionals. We didn't pay them 1 cent. For love of country. Now, don't get me wrong. I have no problem with paying consultants. No problem. That they work, they go to school. Apart from the propaganda that you're spreading about me, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know, let's leave that alone. Mr. Speaker, I have consulted for CARICOM. I've consulted for the Caribbean Development Bank. I've consulted for the OECS. Some of the biggest businesses in St. Lucia, I've consulted for them, Mr. Speaker. I've consulted for governments in the region, Mr. Speaker. When I was 21 years, I had a bachelor's degree, an honors degree, Mr. Speaker. But the party that the member from Microsoft leads, he has them on their fake profiles saying I have a certificate in bookkeeping. But, Mr. Speaker, the challenge is, I will come to this honorable house and I will show all my certificates. And I challenge anybody to bring and show all their certificates. Mr. Speaker, if I'm leader of a party and these gentlemen and ladies in my party are spreading deliberate falsehoods, I will have the fortitude I will have the integrity to tell them, do not say that. It is not true. Mr. Speaker, I want to just go very quickly, Mr. Speaker. You see, Mr. Speaker? Allow me, Mr. Speaker, talking about integrity and talking about spoiling people's good name. Talking about, Mr. Speaker, I want, just give me 5 minutes, Mr. Speaker, to deal with an issue, a personal issue, Mr. Speaker. An issue that I take very, very seriously. You see, Mr. Speaker, I have worked all my life with the support of my parents to protect my integrity and my good name. That's all I have. I've worked all my life, Mr. Speaker. And when a party that is led by a gentleman who knows better, who should know better, but because of his lust for power, encourages these things, Mr. Speaker, I must call them out. Mr. Speaker, you heard on their fake profile that some businessman gave me a BMW as a gift, that I was involved in corruption and I got a gift of a BMW, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, you must look at how these people insult you. You must look at the insults, Mr. Speaker. You must look at the insult you and how they believe that you cannot have what other people can have once they work for it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there's a fellow called Champagne who have a BMW. I don't know about that. Mr. Speaker, but look at me and my BMW, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me tell you what I've driven. In fact, that's not it. You're laughing because I borrowed money from you to buy it. You remember that, right? Mr. Speaker, in April 2021, I applied to the government to purchase a vehicle because of the concessions that were given at the time, Mr. Speaker. I bought my vehicle from M Motors. It's a white BMW 321 right-hand drive, Mr. Speaker. My vehicle costs, the listed price of this unit is $215,000. And because of the duty-free concession, I got it for $131,111.11. I paid 12.5% VAT, which is $16,308.99, and the total price was $147,500. And at the time, Mr. Speaker, I'd made somebody pay for their tongue. You know, and they're not learning. They're learning. They're still coming after me. They're not learning. I made somebody pay for his tongue, and I got $40,000. On April 14th, 2021. Now, somebody that I beat the elections twice, I really beat them, you know, made him pay. I made him pay for his tongue, Mr. Speaker. So I went to Fix and I borrowed $102,414.29. For that, Mr. Speaker, I have a promissory note from Fix, Mr. Speaker, signed on the 14th of April 2021, and there are the loan conditions, Mr. Speaker. An amortized loan, interest 6.25, monthly installment $1,119.90.50, and I signed by the people at the financial institution on the 14th April 2021. For that, Mr. Speaker, I pay the bank $1,190 per month. That's the story of my BMW. I defy them. To give the story of the houses. Give the story. I defy them. Anytime they challenge me, I'll come and give the story. Anytime. And some people say, don't do that. That's politician. No. You must stop trying to spoil people's name with no evidence, Mr. Speaker. Then goes, so Mr. Speaker, I thank you for allowing me that time, Mr. Speaker. Because anytime they do that anytime, Mr. Speaker, I will challenge them. Now, the house at Capel State, Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you something. What is wrong if I own a house at Capel State? But you sold land for $1 per square foot to foreigners. What is wrong? I don't own any house at Capel State. I don't. I do not. I have never. But even though I own a house at Capel, what's wrong in that? Why can't I own a house in Capel State? Why? Won't I work for it? Rodney Bay only good for you, not for me. But I'm proud not to be at Capel State and live in Castries North. When I go and vote this time, I'll vote for him. No? Yes, okay, I forget that, yeah. I voted blue the last time. When, Mr. Speaker, so I'm proud, Mr. Speaker, I'm proud. So I don't have any house in Capel State. But, Mr. Speaker, what they believe is only a certain type of people must live in Capel State. Only a certain type. Only a certain pedigree. And that is why they said to an investor, a member head is not the right pedigree to control that kind of business. That is what they want, Mr. Speaker. And what hurts me the most, is there are little victims, according to George Odlum, who follow this foolishness just because of self-hate. Mr. Speaker, it's a serious psychological problem. It's a problem that goes on to history, how we hate ourselves, and we do not like to see people like us advance, Mr. Speaker. They think that we have a ceiling. There's only a ceiling we can reach, and anything above that ceiling is not for us. And that's why you all the nonsense, the Prime Minister say from Marshall, nonsense, because of that self-hate, Mr. Speaker. But you see the men and women on this side? The men and women on this side, Mr. Speaker, all of us love our people, love our country, and love ourselves. So we want the best for our people, our country, and ourselves, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, let them come again. Come again, Mr. Speaker. And the people who support that, people who know better, people who would never been looked at before, but right now, because it's politically convenient for them, Mr. Speaker, they play like they're supporting that foolishness, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, back to St. Jude and the sufferings of the people of St. Lucia. So, Mr. Speaker, we find ourselves in a situation in July 2021, Mr. Speaker. And that committee was formed, Mr. Speaker. That committee was formed, and that committee was asked to report to the government. It was formed in October 2022, Mr. Speaker. September, and it reported in October 2021, and it reported in November 2021, Mr. Speaker. And between that time, between 2017 and 2019, in these original buildings, Mr. Speaker, the buildings were deserted. Bush grew on it. It was infested by rats. Animals roamed it, Mr. Speaker. And they destroyed 2 buildings. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, 2 buildings that were already constructed were bulldozed like the custody suites. Bulldozed, Mr. Speaker. You mean to tell me in a country, a poor country like St. Lucia, a country where you complain about the roads now and fix the roads and reduce the cost of living and you're making money on gas, you've destroyed 2 buildings worth $7 million? And up to this day, the people of St. Lucia have not been told why these 2 buildings were destroyed, but with $7 million poorer, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, remember I told you that there was procured equipment that was available and that was purchased by the people of St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, you know, between 2016 and 2021, that government did not even try to secure these items. Mr. Speaker, they allow it to rot. They allow it to Speaker, while people are suffering in St. Jude, while people are in pain, you have a surgical ward, you have stuff that you purchase. You allow it to rot, Mr. Speaker? You leave it in containers to rot just because you want to pay political retribution, Mr. Speaker? So there's a report done. When I came into government, you see, Mr. Speaker, what I always do, one of my greatest strengths is my patience. What we did, whilst they're talking, 70% complete, this is not complete, Mr. Speaker, we were working. So we caused an inventory to be done on the materials that they left behind. Now, Mr. Speaker, listen to that. We did not, the inventory was done by somebody who was working with them. Because we don't want, you see, this thing is serious business. This is millions of dollars involved, Mr. Speaker. So we don't get involved in any witch hunt or any hanky-panky. Somebody who was working with them was asked to do the inventory, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, it will hurt your heart. It will hurt your heart, Mr. Speaker, to see the inventory that was left to rot. That was left in containers. Things that could be used, Mr. Speaker, left to rot. Windows, tiles, pumps, a tank, and hundreds of items, nearly hundreds of items, Mr. Speaker, for the hospital was allowed to rot and remain in a container because this government, the government at the time, wanted to practice political retribution. They did not want the people of St. Lucia to be in St. Jude only because St. Jude was being constructed by the government of the St. Lucia Labour Party. The only reason why. So they allowed the inventory, and I challenged them. I challenged them to say that's not true. The inventory, apart from you damage 2 buildings, you bulldoze them, $7 million. You have millions of dollars of inventory you're allowed to rot and you're allowed to spoil, Mr. Speaker, because you want to practice political retribution. Doors, windows, medical equipment, Mr. Speaker, you allow it to rot in the containers. You left it in containers to rot. You knew it was there. Because the first report from the consultants told you where it was. They told you what was there. And they told you where you allow it to rot, Mr. Speaker. And now, we are still trying to salvage part of it, but we may have to throw it away. Millions of dollars of equipment. Millions of dollars of equipment, Mr. Speaker. You allow it to rot. Mr. Speaker, so what did the committee recommend, Mr. Speaker? The committee recommended that we should not continue work in the second phase, which I'm going to refer to now as the box. So the first phase and the box. The committee recommended that we do not continue the box, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, listen to the irony of the box. The irony of the box, Mr. Speaker, and my colleagues will go into more detail. I'm just going to give just a tip of the iceberg and wait for them. Wait for the rebuttal. Just the rebuttal, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the box. At July 2021, Mr. Speaker, between February 2019 and July 2021, $118 million was spent on the box. And that figure is not what I say, is what the Ministry of Economic Development, they are the ones who said it. $118 million, Mr. Speaker, on the box alone. But the box, remember I told you about roofs. I came back just now. Out of that, Mr. Speaker, they spent $89 million in cash. Now, when they tell you there was no money to complete the original St. Jude, let me tell you where they got the money and how the money was there. You see, Mr. Speaker, because they never knew they would be where they are today. So they thought they would be able to hide, cover up all that. And that's why they fainted when they lost. Because they never expected to be there. Because all these things were kept under the cover. And if we had lost the election, we probably may have never known, Mr. Speaker. So they are pretending that there was no money to complete the original St. Jude Hospital, Mr. Speaker. But let me tell you what. They spent $89.3 million. Let me tell you where they got the money from. $10 million loan, which is the same loan we took in October 2014, $10 million US dollars loan, and a $20 million US loan in January 2020, Mr. Speaker. So they had $30 million worth of cash available to complete the original St. Jude. 30 million US, Mr. Speaker. And the balance they got from counterpart financing, from revenue, from the state, Mr. Speaker. So, there was $89 million to complete the original St. Jude. $89 million. They didn't use it. They put it in the box. But that's not all what they spent on the box. That's not all they spent on the box, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there were receivables which I am paying now. I am paying now. We are paying it now. Because, you know, Mr. Speaker, the last government, in practicing political retribution, sometimes refused to pay contractors who they believed were against them, Mr. Speaker. And you know now, I have to pay the interest. Now I have to pay the interest. How do we now? Because they're practicing political victimization. Don't pay that. Don't pay it. Don't pay it. That's what they did, Mr. Speaker. And now I have to pay it. And, Mr. Speaker, do you know that all the contracts that were given under the last government, you know we paid every month? We paid every month. We paid every month, Mr. Speaker, because we have obligations, Mr. Speaker. So, they left us with $28.7 million worth of payables on the box. $28.74 million of payables on the box. And there's more to come. That's not all the payables. There are more payables behind. So, Mr. Speaker, and listen to the most revealing part of it. After they spent the $180 million, they still have money for the main consultant, the main contractor. But you heard one some time ago, he said, oh, it was OECD that had the contract to build the hospital. Mr. Speaker, I mean, Mr. Speaker, do you know that after they spent $118 million, they prepared a direct award on July 15th, 2021 for $70 million to be repaid in 1 year. The civil servants had the foresight to realize that was hot. So he sent it to the Attorney General. And the Attorney General decided, you see that? I'm not touching that. So it stayed there and I saw it. $70 million. A week before election, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, you know, my colleague has asked me to do what? If I knew, I would tell you. But it's the terms, Mr. Speaker, the terms of that $70 million that's That is disturbing. So we stopped it. We said, no, that's not happening. So I told the Ministry of Economic Development to tell me how much money we owe on the box. You know how much money we owe on the box, Mr. Speaker? Another $36 million. And, Mr. Speaker, you see, Mr. Speaker, the same, let me get back to the same, because, you know, they always want to accuse people, the best financial managers, and Pierre don't know what's happening in the economy, and blah, blah, blah. Let me tell you the conditions of that $70 million, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the finance cost was $6,653,811, making a grand total of $70,754 to be paid in 1 year. Interest 6.5%, Mr. Speaker. Listen to the clause that this Minister of Finance would put solutions through if the solutions didn't stop him. In case of late payments, any invoice submitted by the company, the client shall pay interest of 1% per day. To the company on the amount overdue. So, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance decided that he was not paying that. What? What? Yes, everything, comrade, everything I say, I make it available for you. And I want everything you say, make it available. Everything you want. You see, you want them now? I can give you the inventory report. I get everything you want. Everything I want. I don't read paper. I don't read things that I don't see. I don't read blank sheets. More, Mr. Speaker. So you have $70 million. So we stopped it. We say we're not paying that. So I sent the ministry back to go and do a reconciliation. And they returned and saying that we owe that company $36 million. Construction company. After we spent $118 million, we still owe the company $36 million for work that they have done. $36 million, Mr. Speaker. Don't mumble under your breath. Say it loud. Stand up and tell me I'm wrong. $36 million plus $118 million is $154 million that was spent on the box. Now, Mr. Speaker, after you spend $154 million, listen to what is most significant, Mr. Speaker. You heard them say that they're building a state-of-the-art hospital that could be finished in 6 months. And they had a helicopter on top, helicopter pad, and, and people would come and land their plane, state-of-the-art, finish the hospital, demonstration, finish the hospital. You allow the police to go and demonstrate. Finish it. They would helicopter to land on it, and they would have Minister members listen to me instead. Because what I'm saying to you is much more important. So you spent $118 million, Mr. Speaker, and then $36 million you owe to a contractor. As is my style, I will not mention the contractor's name. That's $154 million, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, listen to that. Listen to that. At that time, the Ministry of Economic Development says it would mean that the government will have to spend $76.75 million more to complete the ground floor. The ground floor. To complete the ground floor. And it says the total funding required would be close to another $100 million. But, Mr. Speaker, when they said so, there's certain stuff that they did not know. They never knew. They were assuming that the roof was complete. They were assuming that helicopters could land on top of it. And when the rain fell and we showed the water leaking inside, they said it was camera tricks, and that's not true. And look at the state of the art thing and something. That's what they were saying. They did not know, because you see, they did not know they would lose the election. They didn't know that. But, Mr. Speaker, when we look, now remember, the box has no partitions. There is not one bed. There's nothing, just a box. It's leaking. There's, now you say you're going to go in the ground floor. So you go have sick people in the ground floor and people working upstairs. In a hospital. 70% complete. Not one partition, nothing. But, Mr. Speaker, to make it worse, the roof wasn't completed. And, Mr. Speaker, we asked the contractor to give us a quotation of how much it would cost to complete the roof. A building that was 60% completed, how much it would cost to complete the roof, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, we were told that it would cost us $16 million to complete the roof. In addition, another $16 million, Mr. Speaker. So you have to add $16 million to that. So what they had there is actually $170 million. And I have to find $60 million because we have to protect it. Because if we don't protect it, the water will come in and all the cladding and build these things. The report came from the contractor who we asked a quotation to. I don't want to mention his name. If you insist, I can do it. I want $16 million to complete the roof in a hospital. You say that's 60% complete, Mr. Speaker. $16 million. So in total, Mr. Speaker, the box with no partitions, no equipment, is $170 million. Mr. Speaker, you think that's right? In summary, Mr. Speaker, the cost of the box, $89.3 million spent from $10 million US loan October 2014 and $20 million US loan in January 2020 and counterpart financing from the revenue. That is $89 million. Payables, you owe people, I have a list I can show if you want, of $28.7 million. You owe a contractor $36 million. That gives you a total of $154 million. Now, and you've also found that the roof is not complete. You have to spend $16 million to complete the roof in a hostel, you see, that was 60% complete. Total, $170 million. But there is more, Mr. Speaker. More bills are coming. Bills for security services, $689,000. More bills coming, Mr. Speaker. In a box. Some of you said that was 70% complete, Mr. Speaker. That's what you've told the people of St. Lucia. That this government is callous and Pierre don't know what he's doing. Complete the hospital. Complete it. You have no partitions. You have a roof that's leaking. You have no equipment. You have nothing. And you spent $170 $70 million, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this, and that's it. That's it, Mr. Speaker. As per your request, please find attached our revised proposal for enclosure works, inclusive of insulating and waterproofing of concrete roofs for St. Jude's Hospital, the new main wing, the dialysis and physiotherapy buildings. The total estimated cost, inclusive of VAT, is $16,326,624.05. So, Mr. Speaker, this government, under the member from Microsoft as the Minister of Finance, caused taxpayers to put $170 million in a box, and where you need $100 million more to complete it. And he left some structures that were covered. That was his own report says that it could be completed as a hospital. He left it after he spent $89 million there. And we had equipment, we had fixtures, we had medical equipment to complete it. He left it. Left it for rats and rodents and bats and bush. He left it there because of his own words. Because of his own words, Mr. Speaker, his own words. You are going to continue a flood project for the sake of meeting your mandate. That's the reason why. For the sake of meeting your mandate, Mr. Speaker. He left it there, and the taxpayers of St. Lucia and the poor people of Viewfort and the South are in pain in the hospital, and you give them horses and tell them it will only be Pearl of the Caribbean. You refuse to finish our hospital. You refuse to finish it. You refuse to give them proper health care. After you have a building that your own report says can be salvaged, you leave it like that, and you want to give them horses. You sell the land, $1 per square foot. You lease it for 99 years to live in a mirage, a horse racing mirage. You spend $15 million to build a road to facilitate an airport. Mr. Speaker, and there's going to be a debate on the airport too. Because you see, we are not going to hide anything. There's going to be a debate on the airport also. Because that's a story St. Lucians must hear. Another story of recklessness, carelessness, etc. They'll hear a story. Because this mirage that financial managers and this and that that must be proven to be untrue. We're going to debate Human International Airport. And I want to assure the people of St. Lucia that we are going to complete Human International Airport. But we're going to debate it. And Mr. Speaker, finally, I've apologized to the people of St. Lucia for St. Jude. I want to tell them that every man and woman in this room, and every man and woman of goodwill, our motive, Mr. Speaker, our aim, our objective, which we will do at the soonest possible opportunity, is to move the people of St. Lucia from the George Odlum Stadium and put them in better conditions. That is our singular, most important mission and vision, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you. Again, I want to thank the nurses, doctors, medical staff for the work they put in, and the patients, Mr. Speaker, for what they are suffering because of selfishness, what they are suffering because of callousness, what they are suffering because of vindictiveness, what they are suffering because they don't want to follow the mandate of the party, what they are suffering because they do not want the people to believe that the Labour Party is the one who competed St. Jude. Because of that, Mr. Speaker, apart from being $170 million poorer, they lost the lives that may have been lost because of the situation at St. Jude, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to assure them that redemption is near, Mr. Speaker. And this government will complete St. Jude. We've started, Mr. Speaker, and let me tell you briefly what we've done. Mr. Speaker, when we decided based on the advice of the review committee, that we will continue work on the regional side. They went on the page and they said that the Prime Minister said he'll just fence it. That's what they said. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister said, oh, why fence? The Prime Minister is just going to fence it. Let me tell you what he's done, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and I want you, Mr. Speaker, I don't know if you go to the South still. I want you, Mr. Speaker, when you visit the member for Choiseul, on your way, instead of passing on the west coast, passing on the east coast. But Mr. Speaker, we're going to be potholing that road. I want to apologize to people that the road there are some potholes in the road, but we're potholing it. We're going to pothole these roads. We are potholing it. But if they didn't waste $118 million on St. Jude, all these roads will be potholed. That money that they throw away on St. Jude, that money that they use for political retribution, if they had completed the People's Hospital, when they had the money, $89 million were available. They wasted it in the box. The roads in St. Lucia would be in a better state. So, Mr. Speaker, I want you to visit the original buildings, and you'll see the transformation in these buildings already, Mr. Speaker. The transformation. And a friend of mine went there, and he said tears came to his eyes when he said, why would a government be so callous to allow these buildings to get in that situation just because you want to pay political retribution? I want you to go there, Mr. You can see. So where we are now, we've cleaned the buildings, we've got them ready. All the original plans, these plans are being put together. We'll send them to the DCA for approval, staged approval, and work will continue, Mr. Speaker. Work will continue. The fencing will start as soon as the fencing material has arrived. We have formed a steering committee. We formed a management committee, Mr. Speaker, and work is going to continue. By the end of this year, you'll have seen significant work being done on that as well, by the end of this year, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not going to speak about dates, but I can tell you, all things being equal, with the help of God, the people of St. Lucia will be in the St. Jude Hospital in the shortest possible time. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.